In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, and by offering the peace and blessings of God Almighty on His most beloved Prophet, we start our session today entitled Economic Systems Throughout Human History. Now, as we said, this is the first practical lesson of this seminar after the four theoretical lessons that we saw before. So before we continue, we should remind each other of what we saw in the theoretical part, what we learned so far. The first thing that we learned is that knowledge can either be true or false, beneficial or harmful. All right? So some people have false knowledge and some people have true knowledge. Not all knowledge is equal in both quality and quantity. The second point is to make correct judgments, an objective criteria is needed. So we agreed on the concept of criteria, and we understood what could make something objective or subjective. The third point, nuance must be considered to arrive at accurate conclusions. Nuance, or the gray area, should be considered, should be taken in consideration when we make judgments. Why? To be accurate. The fourth point, understanding power relationships is key to every situation. We saw the concept of power dynamics, and how that plays a big role in pretty much everything that exists, both abstract or physical. The last point is that higher sciences are responsible for the way other sciences are practiced and used. All right, higher sciences. Can you give me a definition of what we mean by higher sciences or an example? This is something that we saw in the last session. The higher sciences. Seems like you forgot. Higher sciences are sciences that deal with important matters, and mostly abstract, like, yes, metaphysical sciences, very good. Religion, ideologies, and philosophies. So the question of purpose, meaning, ethics, the creator, etc. So your position in regards to these matters condemns you to use other types of sciences in a certain way. Whether it is the right way or not, that's totally dependent on your position in regards to higher sciences. So these are the most important points that we saw in the theoretical part. Of course, without forgetting that we used structuralism to arrive to these conclusions. So we will continue to use the same analysis, but now we will use these points to help us analyze practical issues that exists in real life by taking real life examples. Now let's begin. The introductory question here is, what makes economy so important? So this lesson is about economy. So why is economy so important for us? And why is it necessary to study it, or at least know a few things about it? Or do you think it is important to begin with? Is it important? Hmm? Why do you think it is important? Right, one of you said it's the engine of society that keeps it going, especially today. All right, engine of society. In what way that's the case? Another of you said it is the key to keep countries afloat. Afloat in regards to what? In regards to morals, ethics, mm, social relations. Right, money. The concept of money. Of course, economy is about the concept of money. So money is very important. That's both a question and a statement. But how important it is? So these are the questions that will be answered in the following slides. As always, we start with definitions, answering the question of what? The primary question. What is an economy? To begin with, what is economy? Economy is whatever human activity that participates into a system where richness is created and circulated within a society. All right? This may look complicated, but it's not really. It's any human activity that creates richness and circulates this richness, aka money, within a society. All right? So any human activity about money. As simple as that. Now, this richness can either be natural or manufactured, between parentheses, human products. So, a product that humans produce, but it has value, monetary value. So, not only money in papers or coins is only money. No, anything that has value is considered richness, wealth. But the question here is, why does the economy exist? Why do you think the system should exist to begin with? Could it have been possible to go on with our lives without such system that circulates and creates richness?
I think it just naturally exists because humans have to trade between each other and do some transactions to circulate these resources. And as a result, economy exists.
Very good, excellent. Excellent answer. It is because humans are social creatures. Therefore, it would not have been possible to have it in any other way except this. Because humans have to make contact with each other and benefit from one another. If they were solitary creatures, it could have been possible. Each one will go on with his life without having to worry about the others, not making any social relations. Now, what is in an economic system? What is an economic system? We saw what is the economy, but an economic system is something even more precise. A system of production. It is a system of production and resource management and distribution of goods and services within a society. So it plays all of these roles. First, it's about production. It produces value, like we said, and it manages resources, the natural resources or human resources, and distributes goods and services within said society. So these are the three pillars of an economic system. However, there are different types of economic systems. Each is built on certain ideas and assumptions. So not all economic systems are the same. There have been different types, which we will tackle in the following. Can anybody tell me an example before we move on? If you
We
know
have
any.
today capitalism, and there was also
All right, capitalism.
yes,
What you're saying now is like, yes, it is an economic system,
yeah,
but it's not a type of an economic system. Capitalism, communism, etc. These are not the types. These are forms. We will see the difference and see that capitalism is part of a type. So we will see that. We have four main types of economic systems. The first one, traditional economic systems. In this form, or in this system, it relies on unorganized labor and resource distribution with hardly any specialization or structure. This is the most ancient and basic form of economy. This is how it started. It is traditional. That's why it's called traditional. It's not organized, and each one basically does whatever. And based on your needs, you go on. If you need some sort of service, you go to the person who decides to do it. So nothing is organized, but it flows naturally. And during that time, it was all what humans asked for. Nothing sophisticated, but it serves the needs of the people. So that's what I'm explaining here. Traditional economy is a direct result of the simplicity of its time and the little availability or access to resources. It is very simple, and due to the little availability to big resources, especially as common people, we're not talking here about the elite, therefore you can only do so much. Nevertheless, it is highly sustainable and efficient for its time, and because it is, in a way, a free market without any interventions. But it suffers from some disadvantages, like not being organized and the maldistribution of resources. Let's discover the second type of economic systems. Command economic systems. In such systems, they rely on a dominant and centralized authority to direct the economy and city structure. All right, here now we have an intervention, someone who controls. Therefore, it is organized. In command systems, the government or the ruling class, it's the same thing, is responsible for the means of production and the distribution of richness within the society. So there is some sort of monopoly over resources by the government or the ruling class, which of course is the authority, centralized authority. So it directs the economy in the way that it sees best. Of course, best here in regarding to the elites themselves. Very, Very little that we find that the best is about the people. Yes, it doesn't necessarily mean the good or the benefit of the people. So in theory, it is a fine mode of economic order. Why? Because it's organized and structured. However, there is always suspect to corruption and mischief. This is what I just articulated, as well as the inability to adjust quickly in times of crisis. Why? Because everything is in the hands of one party. So to be responsible for the economy of a whole nation, it is very archaic and very difficult to manage on such a macro level. So as we see, these systems can have advantages and disadvantages, and they are the result of their time. For example, command economic systems uh, appeared when empires started, when people no longer lived in tribes and little societies. Now, the third one is market economic systems, which one of you has mentioned. Very good. So, in market systems, they rely on the concept of free markets, which does not allow or rely on government involvement or supervision. So, in this case, it is similar to traditional economic systems. However, in this case, it is organized and done purposefully, not like traditional, because it was just left on its own. In a pure market economy, resources are regulated only by people, based on the concept of demand and supply. Now, what is demand and supply? Can anybody give me a definition or an information about it? Demand and supply.
Meaning, for example, you want some bread, and I can provide that. That's demand and supply.
Very good. Yes, this is pretty much what is demand and supply. It's when you demand and need, and someone has your needs supplied to you. And this is what our modern day economic systems rely on. Concept of demand and supply. This is in a pure market economy. It is free. But the most important part here is that resources are regulated only by people. However, who are these people? That's the question. Is anyone able to regulate resources or able to acquire these resources? The market is balanced by itself in what classical economists call the hand of God. Now, this is a concept for classical economists. We will tackle these people later on, who say that in a free market, even though it can be chaotic, but it reaches balance by itself. Why? Based on the concept of demand and supply. Because everyone has needs, and therefore, when you provide such needs, then the balance is created. So, as much money you give, as much money you take. And that's the balance. That's what they call the hand of God, because God is the one who's responsible of making it organized. Now, what's funny here is that these classical economists approve that God has a hand, but Jahmis and Asharis don't do so. That's the ironic part. Now, the question remains again, do all people get to have the resources, or is it only a selected few? Now, what is the answer to this question?
Uh, it's naturally only the people who can provide those supplies who can control them. Right?
Right. And what do you need to supply?
Resources. Access to those resources, of course.
And what gives you this access?
I have no idea. Money?
Exactly, money. It is very simple.
But
If you have money, you have access to resources.
But sometimes you can have access to those resources without money. Like you have those resources. Just let's say you have a land and you can just plant seeds on that land, and then you have vegetables that you can sell. It doesn't require you to buy those vegetables in order to sell them. You just can produce them from your land. It doesn't require
Everything
money.
you said is correct. And I already mentioned that money is not just papers and coins. I already said that anything that has value is considered money in economy. All right?
I see.
Therefore, the land itself is money.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome. The fourth and the last.
Before we move on, could you further explain the difference between traditional economic systems and market systems? Because they seem too similar to each other, and I just can't put the difference between them.
Right. In essence, they are similar in the fact that both of them rely on free markets.
Right.
However, the difference is organization. In traditional economic systems, nothing is organized. But in free economic systems, and like I said, these systems are the result of their time. The free market system only appeared after the Industrial Revolution. And therefore, things were already organized in a sense that societies are large, there are specialties, people are specialized, people know what they can do and what they can't. There are different specialties, each one takes a certain specialty. And it's organized by the people themselves, but those who have the resources. So instead of having the government to organize it, it is the people themselves, but the people who have resources. So we just replace government with the people. In a way, market economic systems are a mix of command and traditional systems.
Thank you.
No, I mean organizations. I mean institutions. I mean companies, enterprises, etc. These are what provide structure to an economy. But in the case of traditional economic systems, there were no such things. Everyone worked for themselves. No economy, no, no organizations, no enterprises in the real sense, okay? You can have some people working for you, but it's really not a company, not... Right. We arrive to mixed economic systems. In this type, we combine now market and command systems. Mixed or dual systems are those that combine both aspects of command and free systems. The term is used to describe a market that appears to be free on the surface, but also supervised and controlled by the government to a certain extent. It's not total control, but the government intervenes and controls the market to some extent. In today's world, this is the most common type of systems in today's world. What we have today is this form of system. It is mixed. It is not pure. And by the way, the pure market system does not exist. In theory, it should combine both positives of the two systems. However, in practice, these systems tend to lose their free aspects in favor of control and regulation. So this is the downfall of such mixed systems. At the end, always the free part is lost in favor of control. I gave here an example of oligopoles. Do you know this concept of oligopoles? We have monopoles and oligopoles. Now, a monopoly is when one party takes the whole market. All right, it controls the market, provides one type of product, and is the only product that is bought in the market. Total control over the market. In oligopoles, it's not only one party, but let's say that in essence, we have a free market and many contributors are competing in this market in order to sell their product and make profit. Suddenly, the three most popular products and most successful companies decide to join each other and dominate the market. The other contributors still exist. However, they have such a small piece of the market that it is insignificant. And the market is essentially controlled and dominated by this oligopoly. Therefore, it may appear to be free market when everyone has the chance to compete with each other. But in reality, these oligopoles eliminate competition and makes it basically a control and command system. And we can see that clearly in our today's world. Many companies decide to do this, especially in countries like ours. For example, can someone give me an example of that? Let's say Maroc Telecom, for example. It is an oligopoly. It dominates the market, but it lets the other contributors exist, but only to a certain extent. They can never give better offers. Legally, it's not possible for them to do that. We can even see some monopoles, for example, in the case of the train system. It is only one company that provides this service. Now, can we say that this is a free market? Of course, we cannot say that. Right, the one that has the lion's share. Right, exactly. Now let's move on to something much more interesting, which is schools of thoughts pertaining economy. In economy, we have different school of thoughts. And each school has different ideas, different assumptions. So let's see first classical school. the classical economy of school. And these are modern day school of thoughts. So this school is represented mostly by the works and ideas of Adam Smith. This is the most prominent figure relating to classical economy. In this school of thought, wealth of a nation is measured not by gold, but with GDP. So before modern times, the wealth of any nation was measured by gold. How much gold does it have? However, in modern times, that's no longer the case. It is how much money does this country make, which is represented by GDP, gross production. A self-regulated market is most efficient. So this school promotes free markets, self-regulated markets, without the intervention of the government. Prices depend on production costs. So the price of any product is based on how much money it costs us to make such products. And you add the margin of profit, of course. At the end, you're trying to make profits. But obviously, the more expensive the cost of a certain product to make plays a big role in how expensive this product is. Consumer spending is the primary source of wealth generation. So in this economy, in this school of thought, economy relies on consumer spending. How much the consumer spends. The more he spends, the better a nation's wealth is. And at last, it relies more on macroeconomics. Now we have to make a difference between macroeconomics and microeconomics. Macroeconomics are the big aspects of economy. For example, consumer spending, inflation also, the value of a certain currency, etc. These are macroeconomics. But micro, we will see them later on, are small matters that play a big role, in fact, in economy as a whole. So here we have the classical school. These are more or less the principal ideas of this school. On the other hand, we have Keynesian school. This school is a reaction to classical school of thought. And more or less, it is an answer to it, or it tries to debunk it. So it is based on contrary ideas. In this school, it is represented by the works and ideas of John Maynard Keynes in the 1930s. It comes as a response to the Great Depression and the failure of classical economists to provide explanations to it. That's what I just said. It comes as a response because the classical economists could not provide explanation why the Great Depression that happened in the 1920s after the World War I, they could not explain why it kept on happening and why did it stay longer in United States than other parts of the world. Now, even Germany, who was most affected by the war, was able to recover much faster than United States. And classical economists failed to explain why or give solutions. In this school, it advocates for government intervention and regulation, especially during crisis. So this is the solution that they gave. We no longer can continue having a free market that is self-regulated, because as we see, the problems are continuing. Therefore, we need the government to intervene. Now, how is it going to intervene? It is the role of total spending in managing aggregate demand, which is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is basically the government spending. It is the government putting money in the markets itself. How are we going to do that? We're going to do it by collecting money first. And this is where we have the taxation. This is where they started to tax everything. Before, of course, taxation existed, but it was only done, for example, one time. But now this concept of fiscal policy began. Everything became taxable. Your land, your products, your salary, your house, anything that you own, etc. All right. So we collect money, and then that money we use it to create enterprises, create companies, give credits, give loans, which will enhance the economic wheel of the society. I hope this is clear for you. But this was the way to get out of such Great Depression, of the economic crisis. Of course, they were able to get out of it, but at what cost? It was a short-term solution. At the end, it created the real monster of the capitalist system. Also, this school highlights the cyclical relation between production, employment, and inflation. Of course, in a crisis, we have unemployment. And that was the big problem back then. People had no jobs. And it was very difficult to create them. Now, as I said earlier, through fiscal policy, the government was able to restart the economic wheel and keep it moving by creating job opportunities. Also, besides the fact that they started taxation on everything, also government spending relied on printing money out of thin air, money that does not really exist. Only papers that do not hold real value. Or at least back then, before getting rid of the gold standard, because they only got rid of it in the 70s, still they were printing money that they did not have the gold value of it. Therefore, it was still fake in a sense. But as time went on, it became even more fake because they got rid of the gold standard in general. I will explain this much further later on. I'm just giving you some ideas to explain the cyclical relation between production, employment, and inflation. Of course, when we have more production, it means we need more labor, more hands to work, more, which also fights unemployment. It creates jobs, which keeps inflation in check. All right, and this is the irony of this system. They are trying to fix problems that they created. Now, inflation is a problem purely existing on the fact that, yeah, what is inflation? Okay, inflation is in Arabic تضخم للعملة. It's when the currency either loses its value or the opposite, or the product becomes so expensive. Both lead to the same thing. This creates what? The inability of the consumer to buy products that he needs. All right, if everything is expensive, or if the currency is very weak, then how much you need of it to buy certain things? You need a lot. This creates a lot of problems. So as I was saying, inflation is a problem created by the fact that money holds no value. That's why it fluctuates. One day it is worth such and such, the other it is worth a completely different value. The reason for that is that the government is printing money that does not exist, more and more and more. The more it prints, the more the currency loses its value. How can we, or how can the government reduce this problem? They need to take away the money again. It should not keep on recycling and circulating in the market. How do they do that? By taxation also. They tax you to take away the money that is not real, but you feel it because you had it in your hand and you can buy with it products and you can live with it, obviously, even if it's fake. Again, the system is full of ironies. It's ridiculous. So that's why they keep on doing this to reduce inflation. And if the problem of inflation is kept in check, we can still create jobs to a certain extent and keep the cycle of production going. So this is the cyclical relation between these three elements. So if you want to blame anyone for the misery that we have today, you should blame a lot of people, but mostly John Maynard Keynes. He was a big devil. Everything is clear. I hope I was able to explain this. Some things are complicated, but we need to understand it to know what to make of this mess that we have today and to try to navigate our way. All right. Let's see another school of thought, which is the neoclassical school of thought. All right, this school is an attempt to enhance the classical model by sophisticating it through mathematical equations. Like this is a renaissance of classical economy. They try to enhance it, make it better, and provide the solutions that they could not provide back then. It considers three main aspects: people's rational preferences, maximizing utility and profit, and independent choices based on relevant information. These three aspects explain how the cycle of economy works. People have rational preferences. Not all people will demand the same service or the same goods. They have rational preferences. Everyone knows what they need. Also, it is based on maximizing utility and profit. Of course, at the end of the day, we are only trying to make profits. And by doing so, we have to maximize utility. The utility of what? Of the products, of the services. If the utility is so big, we can cover the needs of a large portion of society. And at the end, independent choices based on relevant information. People have independent choices. Well, they try to think they are, but in fact, they do not. Most people have dependent choices. Also, we have the concept of equilibrium between buyers and sellers. This is one equation that they came up with to strengthen the free market theory, which is that even if you let the buyers and the sellers to themselves, at one point they meet at the same point, and it creates equilibrium. So, of course, there should not be more demand than supply, and vice versa. So let each side do their thing, and they will balance each other. This is equilibrium between buyers and sellers. However, you should take in consideration these three main aspects. That's what they built their school at. We have also the integration of microeconomics as a foundation to explain macroeconomics. So we saw before that they relied on macroeconomics, but now they introduced microeconomics. Now, microeconomics is, in fact, what I just said here. It is the choices of the buyers, the customers. It is the ability of the people to spend. It is their rational preferences, etc. These are microeconomics. They went from analyzing society as a whole to analyzing the people themselves individually, the individuals. We will analyze each individual. How much can he spend? What does he need? What plays a role in his preferences, his choices? And they worked on these aspects. At last, they came up with a theory which says that the utility theory of value is better to explain the economy than the labor theory of value. Before, as we said, the classical school said that products, the prices of the products, are based on how much they cost us to make. But in neoclassical school of thought, they said, no, this is an old idea. It's not true, especially today. It is the utility of the product that decides if a certain product is expensive or not. Even if it costs us 2 pennies. If the utility is so big, then it should be sold at a high price. And we can see that in reality. Some products do not cost to make a lot, but they are sold at a ridiculous price. Why? Because they have utility. Phones, for example, very good. They do not cost even a third of what they are being sold because they are very useful and people keep on demanding them. Therefore, the price is big. We can even see that in what? In real estate. All right? Real estate also does not cost nearly as much, but it is sold at such big price. Why? Because it is very useful. The utility theory of value. So we can see that neoclassical school of thought has completely abandoned their old ways in a sense. They have immersed themselves in a capitalist view and they helped enhancing it in a way. So if we look at the classical and the Keynesian school, we can see that the classical had a better moral, better ethics. It was ethical in a sense, but not anymore. Why? I mean, they don't even admit or agree that economy should be ethical. It is not something ethical or not. It's purely material. And this has a lot to do with the higher sciences that we talked about. All right. This is all what we have for the school of thoughts. Now, before we move on to the economic types and their real life applications, we have to understand the history of money. This is a key aspect to understand the economy, especially today's economy. Now, I have a question for you. What are the main phases that the concept of money went through? Of course, money, in all of its shapes and forms, went through different stages. Can you cite some stages for me that money went through? Let's go back as far back as possible in history, see how it started.
Well, it first began as trading. People just traded whatever they had for something they needed. For example, I had wheat, and I wanted meat from you. I could give you the wheat, and you give me the meat. That's how it was a long time ago. And then
Very
it
good.
evolved, and it became trading coins, gold, silver, uh, and also bronze, copper. I mean copper. Sorry.
Well, bronze is correct. All right, yes, that's true. You said something about trade. If you have wheat and I have meat, you give me the wheat and I give you the meat. Only in
Yes,
condition that I want wheat as well. If I don't, then there is no reason for me to make trade for you.
correct.
It should be mutual interest, mutual need. Right, so this is the first form of money, trade. Good. After that, you said coins, right? But there was one before that, which is gold and silver. We can say they are the same in a way because the coins were made from gold and silver. But before the concept of coins started, It was done by pure gold and silver. What else? After that, there are other stages. Don't forget the modern stages. Even today, money is still going through these stages. What do we have today? Paper money. Very good. After the coins, we have paper money. After that, we have digital money. Excellent. Digital money, cryptocurrency. Yes, the Bitcoin, etc. Right. Before digital money, there is also one form. We still use it. We use it a lot. It's between paper money and digital money. Now, for example, you are far away from me. I need to send you some money. What do I use?
An application. An app.
Right, an app of what?
That,
Very good. A banking app. Right,
yes.
online banking. Very good. That's one other form, which is numerical, but it is virtual in a sense. It's kind of like digital money. It is actually the first form of digital money, but not like a separate currency, like the Bitcoin or the digital currencies. So here we have this illustration that represents the evolution of money from barter systems to digital era. So barter is the same as trade. All right? You can trade anything that you have, whether it is food or sources, natural sources, like wood, like iron, and so on, and get what you want. This was in the traditional economic system. After that, we have gold. Right, this is what I said. Before the concept of metal coins, or even golden coins or silver coins, people traded with gold itself. And back then it was much more popular and much more available than what it is today. Then we have metal coins. First, they started as gold and silver, or iron, or bronze. And then it became simply iron. They got rid of gold and silver. Why do you think they do that? Why did they get rid of the golden standard?
To simply control the market.
How so?
Because if they get rid of gold, which is a form of a currency that people use freely,
what
they
makes it free? This is the question. What makes it free?
The accessibility.
No, it's not the accessibility. It is something else. What is the difference between golden coins, which are made of gold, of course, and paper money, which are not made of gold and are not based on gold?
Gold is worth the gold. Paper money is
Excellent.
worth nothing.
Very good. What makes it free is the value. It retains its value at all times, all places. It does not lose its value. And it is not controlled by the government. The government cannot come and tell you this gold is worth such and such. It is
And
impossible because it is sought for itself.
and it's
However,
limited.
yes, it is
Not,
limited.
not
Of course,
like
this is why it is
valuable,
valuable
yeah,
because
of
it is
course.
limited.
Not like paper money, it's printed all the time.
Exactly. You can print such money however you like, even though it creates problems such as inflation. But with gold, can we have inflation? It is not possible. Why? Because the currency is always strong, does not lose its value. There are very, very few cases where it did, not in ordinary circumstances. There is only one case in history recorded. It was when the Somalian king, who was the richest man ever, probably, had so much gold, and when he went to make pilgrimage, he kept on distributing gold to any person he saw in his way. Gave huge amount of gold to anybody, and he himself created this inflation. The gold was no longer worth a lot because it was distributed in such an incredible manner. So this is not a real case. It's almost like a fantasy. Elsewhere, it never happened. Now we should understand that paper money at first was not printed just like that. They
Because
did
it was
not get rid of the golden standard right away. And this is something that we will discuss in the next session. At first, they simply said that we will replace gold with paper money, but this money will be backed by gold. So in actuality, we will only print money based on how much gold we have. Therefore, and actually this was a good idea in a sense because that paper money was actually valuable. It existed. It is real because it is backed by the gold and also silver of each nation. Each nation had a sum of gold and silver, and they could only print as much money as gold and silver they have. That way, the balance is kept, and paper money keeps its value. Now, of course, the Jews did not like that, and the United States decided to get rid of the golden standard. This happened in the 1970s. We will see that in detail next session, because that created most of the problems that we see today. Right, after paper money, we have plastic cards. And these cards, of course, they are digital in a sense because they are backed by the online banking system. So the numbers that you see on your bank account are not real. They are simply numbers. And sometimes you can even go to the bank and tell them, give me the money that I have in my bank account. They say, sorry, we don't have it right now. So those numbers, what are they? They are simply numbers to keep you in an illusion that you have such money. After that, we have electronic money. Now, electronic money is the one that we talked about earlier, is when you send money through these applications. Again, these are just numbers, and at any point, you could lose them. The last stage that we have is cryptocurrency. Now, do you think that cryptocurrency is different from these later stages? Does it hold its value? Is it real?
Well, Bitcoin at least.
What about it?
I mean, he has value. It has value, but like as long as it stays decentralized and but they're trying to like to control it as well. That's
Right.
fine.
What makes it valuable?
What makes it valuable is that it's still encrypted, that no one has been able to break the encryption. That's
Right. It also follows, in a way, the golden standard, in a sense that
it's limited,
it
very
is
limited.
limited.
Yes.
Right. So actually, they tried to copy the same concept. However, it can never be like gold because even if it's valuable, it fluctuates. It's not stable. Therefore, it is very hard to create an economy for a whole nation or society based purely on Bitcoin. So you should always have like two forms of currency. You can combine the two. But Bitcoins as a concept are better and more secure than paper money that we have now or the electronic money that is backed by the banking system. Okay, maybe this is a step towards a better economic world. And this is why actually they are fighting the system. They do not want it. Or they want the technology, but want to centralize it. They want the government to control this currency. Okay, if it wasn't such a good thing, they would not fight it. They would keep it. However, nothing is better than gold and silver. That remains the standard, and the best economies in history are those who used this standard of money.
And with the development of supercomputers, that that poses a threat as well.
Can you elaborate?
Because it maybe in the future it may be the encryption may be broken. Might be broken.
Right, right. Yes, this is also a downside of Bitcoin. It is a technological thing and therefore can be broken. Quantum computers. Yes, this is your field. Maybe you could tell us a few things about it. All right. I think we reached the end of this session, but not the end of the lesson. We still have part 2. This was such an interesting concept, an interesting lesson that I could not summarize it into one session. Therefore, I divided it into 2 separate parts. In the first part, we discussed what is an economy, the different types of economic systems, the different schools of thoughts in economy, classical, Keynesian, and neoclassical. And then we saw the evolution of money. In the next session, inshallah, we will see the implementations of these systems throughout history. What you said, capitalism, communism, etc. We will dive deep into these forms and have a historical comparative analysis between different forms of economic systems. So this is all what we have for today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Or if you have anything to add, you're welcome. Hopefully everything is clear for you. We definitely saw some new concepts in pertaining to economy. Maybe you could do more research on it, especially the cyclical relation that we saw and the fiscal policy. It is very important to understand these concepts and their real-life applications. All right, seems like everything is clear. Thank you very much for joining me again in our seminar. And see you again, inshallah, next session.